everybody. Let's continue on this Caleb Williams episode. It didn't take us too long, 6 weeks to get to the Caleb episode. We had several defensive players in the first 6 weeks that we highlighted, and then now we finally get to talk about the quarterback that everybody's been wanting to talk about for a long time. And what better person, honestly, than Tim Jenkins? If you don't know Tim Jenkins, you'll find him on Twitter at @TJenkinsElite on Twitter, founder and CEO of Jenkins Elite, and but former quarterback, obviously, in college football and the NFL. And now you break down a lot of film. I love watching your stuff. So we appreciate people like you because I am not a quarterback guru whatsoever. So sometimes I think I know what I'm talking about and I don't.
I think none of us do. Some of us just have like a little bit more experience, but the fact that you held off for 6 weeks is like all time, right? Because I think everyone's been talking about Caleb for like the last year. So I think that's amazing.
Yeah, and I was waiting. I felt like we would get to a point where it was a have to rather than a like we could, and there was guys like Jaquan Brisker and Daryl Taylor's having really good games, Kyler Gordon. So I wanted to get to some of those guys and give the defensive side of the ball some love because obviously they're on the streak now of not allowing more than 21 points for a while, and we're wanting that to continue, but we've been waiting for a quarterback in Chicago for a really long time, Tim. And I feel like most people feel like this is it. And so we'll talk about some of that, but I do want to start with the first 3 weeks of Caleb's quarterback play and talk about, because there were some issues there, but I think there were issues everywhere. I think there was some of the play calls weren't probably what was best. There was a game against the Colts where he threw the ball over 50 times. You wouldn't expect that from your rookie quarterback in his third game. I think the run game wasn't there yet. It took weeks to get that going, but Caleb also was not playing to the extent he has this last few weeks. So let's start there. What did you see the first 3 weeks from Caleb Williams of still glimpses of maybe it's there, but some of the concerns that were making things not flash right away?
Yeah, I mean, I think Caleb's always made physical throws, right? I don't think anyone's ever turned on his film and been like, oh, he can't make, X, Y, Z or whatever throw. Like he's always been able to make the physical throws. I think for me, the thing that's been funny is I was like super critical of Waldron weeks 1 through 3, right? I thought the play design, I thought the sequencing, I think it was all kind of just, it wasn't great. And then that's gotten better as Caleb's gotten better. And the thing that I wonder, right, because none of us are in building. And so all you really have is like, hey, what can I go off of? You wonder how much he really trusted Caleb. And I don't mean that in like a super negative way towards Caleb. What I mean is you wonder how much he was like, okay, hey, I don't want to just fully inundate him right away, right? Like it's almost as if they kept training wheels on him. And I almost wonder if the reality for Caleb is like, hey, we just need to take the training wheels off. And it seems like they've done that the last 3 weeks, but weeks 1 through 3, all you saw was you kind of just saw like a redundancy on offense, meaning, a lot of NFL teams, it's crazy. Like you'll barely see the same concept twice, right? Mm-hmm. So it's not even that they won't run, stick, right? Where your number 3 receiver's on a little stick route with the speed out in the clear. They'll run that once and then that's it. You won't see it again. Whereas the Bears, you would see them run not only the same concept, but from like the same formation. So it's almost like they had the training wheels on. I think Caleb did the best he could with it. And I think Shane was probably trying to feel Caleb out a little bit in terms of, hey, what can he handle? What can he handle? And then I'm honestly willing to bet that they got to a point after week 3 and just said more or less like, hey, we're probably not going to last in Chicago if we don't start really trying to turn this thing around and win some ball games. The rookie, Caleb's there to stay, right? The coaches are probably sitting there going like, hey man, we might be in trouble. And I'm willing to bet that they just started saying like, screw it a little bit. Let's throw everything at him and see what happens. And I think those last 3 weeks have been great because of that.
Yeah. So I think one of the big things in week 1 that Bears fans were critical when it came to Shane was the lack of use of Cole Kmet. Are you on you like Cole Kmet now, Tim?
Yeah, listen, I've always been a Cole Kmet guy, and here's why is because I think he's one of the guys that people are really hard on him. People are really, there's other people that are hard on DJ Moore. I just think the reality is I think Cole's a great player. I think Cole does a good enough job in the run game, right? I think if there was a knock on him, it's like, hey, does he really like to stick his head in there? And I think transparently, like none of us on planet Earth would love to stick our heads in there against some DNs in the NFL. Like as a former quarterback, like, listen, I barely got breathed on at practice. So I'm like always one of those guys who's like, all right, we got to be tough. And it's like, I've never gotten hit. My wife reminds me of that all the time when I'm telling my boys, hey, we got to be tough. And my wife, Emily, is like, you're not that tough to begin with. So it's hard for me to preach toughness, but I think Cole's a really good tight end. I think he's really good especially when you consider the context of how explosive this Bears offense is. Like, you're talking about, like, you know, to match up with DJ Moore, to match up with Rome, to match up with Keenan. Now you're really talking about your fourth best cover guy out there is on Cole Kmet. When you look at it from that standpoint, he's a really good player, right? I think previous years when you saw him with Justin, you sit there and you go, you know, they're getting, you know, their second or third best cover guy on him, and that's not a great matchup for him, but it's not a great matchup for most tight ends. So I do think Cole, you know, his usage increasing has been awesome. It's always hard, right? Because you know, after week 6, you'd like to see Rome get involved more, but also it's like they finally got Keenan Allen involved. It's just, you're never going to feed everybody. But what I will say is I think they're doing a good job of balancing it out now.
Yeah, I do too. And I've kind of had conversations with people everywhere of, I don't think you can expect the same thing in back-to-back weeks when it comes to the Chicago offense, because there are so many ways to go when it comes to mouths to feed, obviously, and then now the run game picking up too. But let's go back to me, Tim, the game that I felt I started seeing things pivot, and that was the Indy game. I just felt like he started to look more comfortable in that game. Obviously had the most passing yards he's had throughout the season. They lost and didn't score a lot of points, but there were moments in that game where I was like, okay, we're getting close. It's right there. Did you feel similar in watching that game?
Yeah, I think the Colts game will shoot you when you watch him throw it 50-something times. You got to feel good a little bit, right? I think the Colts game was where I was ready to run Shane out of town, right? The Colts game was, I was like, all right, we got to get rid of this dude, because it's like you take this kid number 1 overall and you run speed option, right? That's the kind of stuff, you know, I'm calling for my 8-year-old son, and it's like, you know, it's just not what you want to do. I think you saw Caleb, how accurate he could be in the quick game. You saw him start to drive the football down the field a little bit. You saw that, hey, if there is a game where we've got to throw it, you know, 40, 50 times, he's the kind of guy that can keep you competitive. Those are the things we don't talk about a lot with NFL quarterbacks. It's like, you know, by and large, you want to play complementary football no matter who you are. If you got Patrick Mahomes under center, or, you know, you've got right now Deshaun Watson, right, who everybody thinks is the 32nd best quarterback, you want to play complementary football no matter what. With that being said, there are times where it's like, hey, we got to put the ball in your hand 50 times for us to try to fight back. You know, games are funky. Sometimes, you know, if the other team comes out and scores, right, and then all of a sudden you got a kick return go through someone's arms, they score against 14-0. The whole landscape of it shifts, right? They're going to be coming after you as a passer, and we've got to kind of put the ball in the air because these NFL games are so short possession-wise compared to like college. So to me, I think it showed a lot of what he can do. I also think you started to see like some of the guys like DJ Moore, you started to see how they would gravitate to him even though we're not winning a football game, which I think was key to kind of seeing him as a leader. So yeah, I think that Colts game was a great example of it starting to shift. And I think it was that final straw for the coaches to really turn him free too, which I do think, you know, we probably take for granted now after seeing 3 really good weeks of offense. And especially like that London game that they really ended going into the bye week. I don't think you could have scripted going into the bye week better for this Bears team.
Definitely.
And so to me, yeah, you're dead on. I think that Colts game was a huge momentum shift for the offense.
Let's talk about some of the picks, because he did throw 2 interceptions in that Colts game. We saw the one against the Jags. The Jags won bad. Like, that was just not a good throw. I think he knew that. He said after the game they were trying to compliment him, and he's talked about the interception, but that's just how Caleb Williams is. But the other 2 games, he had 2 picks in each of those games. Outside of that, has not turned the ball over. What have you seen in those moments when he has turned the ball over? What is going on? Is it mental errors? Is it just bad throws? Is it a combination?
Yeah, I would say combination. I think I don't like to say, you know, the Jaguars one was the last one, the one that I really thought like, hey, that, like, to me it like literally looked like it slipped, right? And you know, throughout my whole career with all the interceptions I threw, it's like I can relate to that part of Caleb's game. But when you looked at the stuff in the Colts game, the one that really sticks out to me is the one that he threw on the sideline, right? Because you sit there and it's like, you've got a rookie quarterback. He throws an interception. He's throwing late to the sideline. Why is he throwing late to the sideline? Well, play design had that as like his 3rd or 4th progression, which really we don't really want to be working. You know, there's a lot of concepts that you work inside out. You don't want to be working all the way to the sideline, though, just because of the amount of velo required for a guy to not be able to drive on it is somewhat unrealistic, especially considering how gifted Caleb is from an arm talent perspective. So I tell you, I think like part of I don't want to say he's processing slow, because that's not a fair take for him. He's processing, and the NFL defenders are just fast, right? Like it is what it is. He's got to catch up to it. He's had a couple of bad balls. To me, it's like I haven't seen an interception this season where I'm like, oh wow, that's just like awful, right? And that's what and I don't want. It's always hard because I don't want to make it like Justin versus Caleb, right? Because I think that's kind of like toxic in the fan base. But I do think there's, it's not like what we would see in previous years when I was breaking down the Bears, where you would sit there and some of these you'd go like, hey man, I don't even get why you got there. Some of these are more like I don't understand the play design early in the season. A lot of Caleb's interceptions, though, I get why he's getting there. And then listen, if you throw a 50-50 ball and it gets picked, hey, that's tough. If you're kind of late with your feet, those kind of things are going to happen. But those aren't any different than, Goff when you turn him on, or, Mahomes or Bo Nick, just all these guys, they're no different. They're more or less the same, which is, hey, we're going to make mistakes at the quarterback position too. And there's nothing that really jumps off the film where you're walking away from it really worried about Caleb.
Yeah, there was one, I want to say it was the Colts game when the one to Rome, and it kind of bounced out of Rome's hands into the defender's hands. Those are ones where you're like, that didn't feel like it was on Caleb. But then when you go back to when you're talking about guys like Justin Fields, when you're throwing them to Aiden Hutchinson and the wide open field, that's not what you want to do. Some of the biggest criticisms this offseason, Tim, when we were talking, or when people were talking about Caleb Williams, and it was they don't know if he could play in structure because of the way that Lincoln Riley ran his offenses and how it was kind of quirky and weird and crazy. And Caleb just kind of had to play hero ball a lot. It's almost opposite right now, these last few weeks, of what they've been asking Caleb to do. And I am fine with that because I kind of like that they're letting him test these midfield, intermediate, easier throws and not have to be this superhero right away, and let him kind of perfect that type of stuff. Is that, number one, was structure a concern for you at all coming into the season? Number two, how is he handling those moments? And do you like the way the Bears are doing it?
Yeah, I think like every college kid coming, like you have to worry about if they can play within structure, because the reality is like I don't want this to sound bad, but like college football is so simplified compared to what it used to be, right? Like, 10 years ago when guys were coming out, you were in charge of everything, right? And I when I came out of a small school, it's like you were in charge of the mic point, you were in charge of setting protection, you were in charge of all this. It kind of more or less got replaced by playing fast, right? Hey, now they play fast. You got to put more on the center to do the mic points. We're more or less counting on coverage bus versus, hey, we're going to really read it out. And that's not a knock on the kids. It's not like Caleb gets to choose, hey, here's what, the way I think college football should be. That's just not what it is. So, I think it's a concern for everybody. The way Caleb's playing within the structure of the Bears offense, though, is he's doing a great job. He's operating. If you really want to kind of peel back the layers, in my opinion, when you watch these rookie quarterbacks, downfield and shot plays, I almost like remove them, right? Because those are, when you turn your back to the defense on play action or you do some of that stuff, it's like really anyone can, hey, read 1 to 2 to 3, right? What I love seeing is the quick game, because you see him doing the right job of, okay, basically when you're in these empty sets, all 5 are eligible, right? Like, a lot of concepts you would see, okay, hey, these are the 3 we're really looking at. When you're in empty, man, we're thinking all 5 of these guys could be it. And you're more or less kind of eliminating some of these guys pre-snap. Caleb does a great job of going, okay, hey, we've got this concept against this coverage. I'm going to eliminate these guys, and I'm going to start here, which is technically on paper football, his third progression. He's putting his eyes there first, and the guy's open. He's getting it out of his hand. That's where I think when you watch the rookies, you can tell, hey, is he really picking up the NFL or is he not? Caleb is. So to me, I think that's where I've been really impressed. The playing within the system, like he's going to have to do that to have a long NFL career. He's doing a great job of finding the balance between when do I need to play on time and when is it worth like me scrambling, right? I think about like all great quarterbacks have that where, even going back to like John Elway, right? And seeing his old butt jump and it's like he gets 360'd in the Super Bowl, right? Every great quarterback has that of when is the right time for me to play on time and like preserve my body, and when is the right time for me to extend this thing. Caleb, if you watch him, he does a really good job of, 3rd and long, you're going to probably see him extend the play if he has to, right? Whereas if it's like 1st and 10, let's get the ball in my hand, let's keep moving. And that's what you want to see, especially because you're not looking at Caleb and thinking, man, we want a great 5 years on his rookie deal, right? You're looking at, hey, we're going to have to pay him a lot of money in a second contract, and we want him to be able to hold up that side of the investment. And I think Caleb's more or less showing that through 6 weeks, right? We're only 6 weeks into it, but I do think he's showing, that ability to not always feel like, man, I have to, live or die on this play. I can take what the defense is giving me and then kind of move on.
Yeah, I think to me, some of the more impressive things, and you could talk about some of the deep shots, and some people may have some concerns right now. I'm not concerned about about Caleb Williams having to get the ball downfield and make those passes. To me, some of the questions were being able to complete some of those midfield intermediate, because that's just something Justin Fields, and like we said, we don't want to make it that versus that, but at this point it kind of is. And so those are just some of the things he couldn't ever really grasp, it felt like. And even during the Jacksonville game, this was one play, the play where he was kind of running out of bounds, and right before he gets out of bounds, he gets it to Cole Kmet in the middle of the field. Those type of plays, when it could have easily been him run out and people would have been like, okay, well, at least he didn't take the sack. He never stops looking. And that's one of my favorite things that I've noticed of Caleb Williams.
Yeah, and I think, if you look at Bo Nix last night on Thursday Night Football and Rattler, right? I think they, Bo, if there's any criticism of him early in his young career, he's taken off, right? And I think so when you see these athletic quarterbacks nowadays, like Bo, like Rattler, like Caleb, there's this natural, hey, I could go get all this yardage. So when they do keep their eyes downfield, I think it's a plus. And I think Caleb has that to where he extends plays to throw it. I will say he does a great job too of, Jacksonville gave him man coverage right on that third down, and it's like he could take it and go get 20, which I think is something that that is a really important aspect of playing quarterback, which is, hey, can you recognize man coverage on third and long, and can you make them pay for playing man coverage? Because if you force a team to, when you're in third and long, play zone, you have so many more opportunities to convert third down, right? That's what people don't talk about a lot, is like, some of the greats and their ability on third down. And like Brady and Manning, you weren't concerned as a D coordinator about blitzing them because they could run it, right? That's not why you were scared of man coverage, but you were scared of, hey, he's going to beat you when you blitz. And then now all of a sudden you got to play zone. Well, then the ability to convert against zone on third down is so much higher than man. Man is just tough. When you're getting heat and they're playing man coverage behind it, it's hard to convert. And I do think the ability to extend the play and run for Caleb is also great. He does a great job keeping his eyes downfield, I think, more or less, which is what you want them to do most of the time. But when he does need to make them pay on third down and go and run it, he does a great job with that too.
Give us a couple of your favorite plays that you've seen so far from him this season.
Yeah, I mean, like I'm like a football nerd, so my thing is the fake double screen with Kmet. Yeah. Like, I think is awesome. My favorite play from the whole season, though, is when he fakes the Kmet screen and they're basically showing Kmet's the number 3 receiver. So, when I say that, I mean, like, hey, from the outside in, right? 1, 2, 3. He's number 3 in trips. Kmet's on this little like flat route and he pumps it. They ran that 2 weeks in a row on third down, and it was a garbage call, right? I was like, it was one of those that like always made me mad. Mm-hmm. And then they pumped it, and they had front side go, making it look like they were throwing, and he put his eyes there to move the safety and then comes back and throws DJ Moore. Like, that to me is exciting because he understands like the whole concept, which is, hey, if I don't have a center field safety, let me just work it front side. Instead, I do have a center field safety, so let me move him and they get back to DJ Moore. Those are the kind of things that like I just nerd out. So I think that there's so much that he's done that's probably more exciting than those.
Yeah.
When I see those kind of things where it's like you're using your eyes to manipulate defenders already, I think that's really great stuff for a rookie quarterback.
Yeah, and I think the week before, or no, it was during the Jags game, they did like they zoomed in on his eyes, and you're watching him kind of go through his progressions. And that's something that maybe if you're not like me, it's hard to register those things. So seeing that broke down in that way during the game was fun, because we've heard the numbers of, how many times he's gone to DJ, and DJ, the one touchdown was his third read. And DJ even commented about that, like I was his third read. And I love that Caleb's able to make some of these plays. So when we're talking about that, when you're talking about the progressions and kind of going through those things and manipulating the defenses, are all of the rookies, are there any other rookies that you feel are doing the same thing at the same level as Caleb right now?
I think the closest one is Jaden, right? I think Jaden Daniels may be like a little bit unfair because I think his OC is meeting him more where he's at. And that's not an insult against Waldron. I just think, what they're doing in Washington, right? You've heard other defenders say, hey, it's a college offense. Now, granted, they say that and then they can't stop it. So to me, it's like, I don't think that's a knock against Jaden either, but I do think Caleb's potentially getting asked to do a lot more right now at the line of scrimmage and in the run game. And, I tell you that I think the closest other guy is probably Bo Nix. Bo Nix in Denver, they're not like they're running Sean Payton's offense, right? They're not like kind of, doing anything for him. I do think Caleb right now is in another league, I think, in terms of, hey, the way he's operating the pro offense compared to Bo. I think he's doing a really good job with his eyes. His eye discipline is something that we don't talk about enough. And I always joke with people, right? Because people are like, I can't believe you didn't see him. It's like the same guy won't see, Aunt Judy streaking down the sideline in Turkey Bowl, right? But they're going to get mad at Caleb Williams for not seeing
Yeah.
Cole Kmet. So I think it's like, it's all relative. I think he does a really great job with his eyes. I think in terms of operating a true traditional pro offense, I think he's doing the best when it comes to rookie quarterbacks. I do think Jaden Daniels is probably up there as well, and then Bo's, I think, slightly below them. It'll be interesting to see Drake May now have a little bit of an opportunity to kind of get going. And I do think it's like, we don't really talk about this, but we need good young quarterbacks in the league, right? I think there's not enough quality quarterback play right now. So I do think Caleb has a shot to be that challenger, right? Because I think, we all get excited, but there's also, 15 in Kansas City that everyone's at some point going to have to take down, and 9 in Cincinnati. And you've got to be ready to beat those guys. And I think Caleb operating a pro system this early in his offense or this early in his career is going to kind of have the best shot to do that.
Yeah, the end of the schedule, Tim, when you play the entire NFC North after week 11 and beyond, and then also mix in the Niners in that time frame too, is definitely going to be a haul. But I do think at first when I saw it in the offseason, I was like, this sucks. Like, it's going to be the end of the season. Like, you just going through that stretch of torture at the end. But it's kind of nice now thinking about it, because it is getting Caleb, by that time, Caleb's going to be more and more acclimated to kind of everything. I read a stat earlier, and it was talking about the quarterbacks with the fewest throws to their first read. And so there were guys on one list that were going to their first read the majority of the time, which right now is Daniel Jones, a Trevor Lawrence, Will Levis, some of those guys. And then on the other list was Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Justin Herbert, and Caleb Williams. What technically does that say for those quarterbacks? Because obviously, it's saying, they're going through progressions and they're not just kind of firing the ball right away. But I feel like there's more meaning to that too.
Yeah, those are always hard for me. So here's what I tell you is I think it's twofold. I think it's a clear indication that he knows the offense, right? If you see those guys on that list, it's a clear indication that they know the offense. What I always like to give perspective on is this is something that I'm always passionate about, because I saw it with Locke when Locke was in Denver. Everyone was like, he can't throw to a second progression. And to me, it's like, it's always interesting, because it's like, well, what is a second progression, right? Because for instance, if you pretend you're in 2x2 and your slot receiver on the right, he has a post and it's cover 2. And, on paper, hey, we're supposed to look at the backside, out route and then to the post. But, hey, it's cover 2. I'm just going to move this safety and then clean hitch and throw it. It's like on paper that goes when they chart it, that's a first progression. To me, hey, the offense is a second progression. Yeah. What I could tell you is, if you see the guys on the first progression list, if Caleb was on the first progression list, I'd say, hey, there's still context to that. He might understand the offense still. The fact that Caleb is showing up on the other list, what that tells me is he for sure knows his offense. And the reason that is because, hey, he's in his head doing those same things where he's eliminating his paper first progression and he's hitching that post. And guess what? It's taken. And then he's getting to what would be his third progression. So to me, I think anytime they're on that next list, it's a great thing, which is the list Caleb's on. I also think there's context to be had on, the guys like Daniel Jones and Trevor Lawrence. I haven't watched those guys as much as I've watched Caleb. I would be hesitant to say, hey, they're not progressing. I would have to watch the film first. But it does clearly say that, hey, Caleb knows exactly what to do. And that's factoring in all the times that he eliminates guys pre-snap, which is a ton too in this Bears offense. He's doing, in my opinion, he's doing really great stuff before the ball's ever snapped. So to me, it's like, I think it tells you the world about him. I also think it's probably why they're turning him free so much lately, is because I think they've probably gotten to the point where, they just know he knows football, and now they're really giving him a shot to go out there and do something with it.
So when you're saying he's doing good things before the ball's even snapped, is that just the aspects of like reading the blitzes and all of that sort of thing?
Yeah, I think it's knowing, hey, where you're hot, right? Like, hey, okay, we got too much pressure here. We got to deliver to it. You also see him, he's doing run game checks and screen checks, and there's a lot of stuff he's doing. The only thing I would tell you that I haven't like really seen a ton of is protection checks.
Okay.
And again, like, is that because he hasn't needed to? That could also be it too. That would be the only thing that I tell you I haven't seen. I've seen him do some run checks. I've seen him check them into screen plays against a heavy heat look. I just think he's doing some really good stuff. I think you can also tell pre-snap every once in a while, you'll see him, put his eyes somewhere and then he's really getting to somebody else. And that tells me like, hey, he knows what he's doing because he's trying to manipulate a defender now
Yeah.
versus, hey, I'm just looking at my guy. Let me move somebody in order to get my guy a little bit more space. So he's doing a ton of that stuff. I'd tell you, I'd be interested to see, the protection stuff, but also, unless you're in that building, it's hard to know protection because shoot, they might have this whole offseason, they might have said, hey, we're going to use our center for our protection checks. And
Yeah.
they might have made that decision just because they have a rookie, right? And
Yeah.
then, you don't know. Or in building, it's like, hey, we're going to change our protections we're going to be better with our hots and our sights. And then the quarterback wouldn't have the ability to kind of what we call like a new mic. So instead of miking the true mic, hey, you mic the Sam to kind of manipulate how your guys are blocking. So he might not have that opportunity. They might have tried to build that into the pass game. So there's a lot of stuff with the protections that, like, if you're outside the building, it's hard.
Yeah.
So I need to find a good spy over there at the Bears. But other than that, I think he's doing a really good job pre-snap.
Yeah, it was funny. One of the videos that kind of went viral on Twitter was the one where Coleman Shelton was like, "There's effing fire! There's effing
Yeah.
fire!" And Justin's like,
Yep.
Caleb's like, "I know."
Yep.
So those are just moments that you are seeing, and those are like a normal person watching isn't probably looking at those things the way that you are. A couple more before I let you go, because I do want to talk about that deep ball that maybe some people are concerned about. You really only saw one past 30 yards last week, and it was an interception. What are your thoughts on that? Is it on Caleb? He's a little scared to pull that trigger. Is it on coaching? Is it just what's working is working, so they're not pushing it? What do you think it is?
Yeah, I would tell you if there's anything in the last 3 weeks that I've said, okay, hey, we got to improve. It's when they call a shot play. Caleb at times is getting off that. Like Rome's been open on a couple of them, and it's not like, we also got to contextualize everything. It's not one of those like, hey, screenshot, this guy's open, right? That you see on Twitter. It's like,
I hate those, by the way.
hey, we've ran this play in the NFL for 10 years. Like this is, this is our progression that we need to go to.
Yeah.
And he's open and Caleb gets off it. What I'll say is I don't see Caleb getting off it because his eyes are there and he sees it. What I see is Caleb not giving it enough of a shot. Okay. Which, if you're his quarterback coach in that room, I think you just sit there and you go, hey, listen, let's hitch one more time to this thing. Let's really try to give Rome a shot here, and then we'll get to our check down. Don't be in a rush to get your check down. So the underthrown interception, I'm not concerned about. The ones that I've seen Rome, hey, he's in the progression and he's open. I don't want to say I'm concerned about it. I just think he's playing so fast, and at times when we have those big shot plays called, it sounds weird, but it's almost like you want to play a little bit slower. You really want to give those a shot because when you go from a shot play to check down, there's always so much sink, right? There's always so much sink in the coverage where it's like, hey, this guy's wide open. Okay, hey, let me give it to one of my bigger guys. Whereas, you really want to kind of give that a chance. And I think he is getting off it a little bit early. I don't think it's like he's nervous to throw it. I think it's just he's trying to get through his progressions and play on time. And, there are times that, hey, we got to play on time. And there are other times where, we can really give this thing a shot. And those shot plays are one of them. So that would be what I'd tell you. I don't have any concerns on the interception. I just think at times he needs to slow down just a little bit. Yeah. And then, if he hits 2 or 3 of those, there's really nothing you're concerned about from that perspective.
Yeah, one of the things when we were looking at last week, I honestly thought it was going to be a Rome Odunze day because Rome separates really well, especially when it comes to like man-to-man, and Jags run so much man coverage that I was like, this could be the perfect week for Rome to go off. But to your point earlier in the show, there's so many guys, and it was fun to see Keenan get really involved in this offense because I think we've been waiting for that too. What do you think is best for Caleb moving forward for this offense to progress? Do you think it's good to kind of have all of these different games where different guys having their day, a DJ day, a Keenan day, a Rome day? Or do you think because DJ and Rome are the future, it seems like that it's time to kind of lock into maybe those two guys a little bit?
Yeah, I think honestly, so when you look at it from like, hey, listen, the Bears are competitive right now. This isn't like a hey, let's just develop Caleb year. This is a like, hey, they're 4-2. Let's try and make a run, right? Like you don't get these you know from being, Chicago like knows more than anybody. Like these don't come along all the time. We got to lean into it. So to me, it's like, no, I think what they're doing right now is absolute best case scenario. When I tell you it's terrible as a gambler, right? Trying to bet who's going to have an anytime touchdown is like
you're football owner of any of them.
yeah. So to me, it's like those are the ones that anytime touchdowns right now hurt, and betting over receptions that hurts. So yeah, I think from the fan perspective of hey, they'd like to be able to bet DJ anytime touchdown every week, that ain't going to happen. But from what's best for this team down the stretch, this is exactly what you want to see because it avoids bracket, right? If you can avoid bracket coverage on the guy you actually like to go to, and it's like, more or less, if you really think about, hey, if I'm coming up with a game plan to stop the Bears, it's tough because who are you going to bracket, right? Because 2 weeks ago you did bracketed DJ. Now what do? You bracket Keenan, who maybe is their third best receiver. So to me, it's like it's impossible to defend, which is what you want. You want D coordinators coming into a week really stressing, okay, what are we going to try to take away? Especially when you think of it from an offensive game plan, because it's like, great, you got everything formationally, situationally, but you also as an OC know like, hey, here are my touch plays, right? Hey, how am I going to get Rome a touch? How am I going to get Keenan a touch? How am I going to get DJ a touch? And so if you have those and all of a sudden we see, hey, bracket on Keenan Allen, like you're just calling your DJ and Rome touches, right? Like it's not that complicated to where, to me, if you did just have only feeding DJ Moore, only feeding Rome, then you create an issue for yourself. Whereas right now, I think they're doing it just about as good as you can from a long-term, what they're going to face down the stretch perspective. It's going to be hard to scheme the Bears up.
Which we like to hear. It's been a long time since, number one, we've been talking about a quarterback in this way, but also receivers. I think that's an underrated factor of what Bears have not had much success in their history. But final one, because obviously Bears in a bye week right now. Next week it's Washington, Bears versus Washington. And so what can Bears fans expect from Jaden Daniels? And then how can Caleb? I don't think Washington's defense is too good. I think this is a good opportunity for Caleb to keep growing. But what can we expect in that game between these two quarterbacks?
Yeah, I think really when you watch Jaden, what you're going to see is you're going to see a lot of almost like what you see on Saturdays, right? They're going to run a ton of read zone. They're going to run a ton of RPO. He's going to get the ball out of his hand fast, which I think is kind of, I don't want to say tough on the Bears, but they're not going to be able to get home to him like I think they were to Trevor, right? Where they could really generate some pressure. And then Jaden Daniels also presents that issue of when he breaks the pocket, he's an issue, right? Like Caleb is the same way, but Jaden also is like that to where it's like, hey, if he breaks contain, like we've got major issues. So I think you'll see the pass rush slow down to where they rush even with the quarterback versus flying past him. When it comes to how they're going to attack Washington, this Bears offense is at the point where it's like, I don't think they need to, they're more or less dictating terms, right? Which is a really great thing to be offensively, right? Where that's the biggest difference I see between what Caleb does and, when I watch this Broncos tape is the Broncos almost have to adjust week to week because they don't have those receivers that can go make something happen. Whereas the Bears, they do. So it's like the Bears are dictating terms. I just want to see more of what the Bears did, which is run effectively, use the short to intermediate, and then sprinkle in some shots. And then I want to see Caleb hold on to those shot plays a little bit longer and give him a chance. And yeah, I think it could be a really good week for the Bears. This is a great test for the Bears because I think the only knock people have right now is, the last 3 weeks, they haven't been against, great ball clubs. It's like, well, Washington looks like they're going to be a pretty darn good ball club too right now. So to me, it's like, I think it's a really good test to see where the Bears are at. And if they win this one, I think it's hard to really criticize the stretch they've been on.
All right, Tim. Well, I really appreciate it. I kind of joked before we got on that I've been bugging you for a while for this, but we love what you do. We appreciate all of these breakdowns because it gives people like me a little bit more knowledge on, because it's easy to watch the game and be like, that was a great throw, but then kind of seeing you break things down. So we appreciate you and all you do, especially showing us all the Caleb Williams stuff.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Yep. Have a good one.